traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies. This is the second post of the day, and the second post of the day is usually either like a weirder or more niche read, or it's like a occult or magical chit chat, spiritual chit chat, high strangest chit chat, a life update, book review, or like it is today, it is me talking about my own writing, because I do write fiction on top of tarot and everything else, and whenever I have a little milestone, I'll probably talk some about things that I'm writing. So my milestone is that I set a personal deadline for me to get a draft done on a shorter horror novel. I don't know, here's the thing. I set a personal deadline to complete a draft. It's a first draft of a short horror novel. And I did, like I met my own deadline, so I'm very happy about that. And I don't know what my word count is because I handwrite all of my first drafts, and I have a like second draft that I'm working on of another novel that's printed out. I'm not gonna go get it to show it to you, but when I print them out, I like hand do a lot of the edits, and I stick in like other pieces of paper because I tend to expand on things that I wrote. And so my writing process tends to be like really physical. I don't write like directly onto the laptop. I've tried it, like I really like, it doesn't feel organic to me. I have to like write with my hand, and then I end up doing sort of like a lot of collage work. And then once I'm done with a particular round of drafts or edits, then I type it all up, and in the typing usually like more edits get done. So I completely got out a first draft of a short horror novel, and like the next step is going to be typing that up after I give it a little break. And then I'll know what the word count is, because I'm just like looking at it, I'm just like, I don't know. I'm hoping I at least got to 50,000 words, because I would like for the final product to be around 60 to 65,000 words for a horror novel. And so I would prefer not to be adding a lot of stuff, because I don't know, I'm happy with the draft right now, but I don't know what else. Like I wanted it to be like very contained, like a small cast of characters, like one location, and a very simple concept, and that's it. So I don't want to make it like too much bigger, because even though it's a short like self-contained experience, it is thematically connected to like other stories that I'm eventually going to get out. So in just a little fun celebration for getting that done, whenever I finish like a stage in a particular project, I end up looking at my folder that has other like writing projects in it that either I took to completion and queried and then couldn't sell them, or I ended up like they're just not finished yet. I've kind of like left them, and like sometimes I'll return to them and sometimes I won't. So when I was looking through my folder full of projects, I found one, and I thought, like, why not have a little bit of fun and react to a first draft of a first chapter of a yet unfinished novel. And what's interesting about these two novels, I did not realize this and didn't mean to do it, but the main characters' names in both of these novels are Nora. Well, it's Nora. Nora is the main character's name. So the chapter that I'm about to read you is not from what I just finished. This is from something else. And so I'll have to change like Nora's name probably in this novel when I pick it up again, because in looking at it, I was like, what the heck what was I writing? And then I remembered, like, as I was kind of looking at some of the first paragraphs, I was like, oh, right, this is that story where like this happens. It is like super weird. This untitled, unfinished project is I guess like you would call it dystopian folk horror. So this is set in the future, but an unspecified apocalyptic event has occurred. And so the point of view character in this novel is a young girl, and I think she's like an older teen. She's a mid to an older teen, and she and her mom, I don't know if I give them special names in this chapter, if I refer to them as anything, but they're essentially witches. So if you hear like a funny name that you don't know what it means, it's just like, it's this world's title for a witch. And so in this world, it's pretty much our world, just in the future and after this apocalyptic event. These witches are kind of at the borderland between like what counts as like the last stretches of civilization and then this like wild land, okay, where like it's essentially like the earth has been reclaimed by like forces and entities and things like that, and they live in a very wild, uncanny realm. And then the witches are like living right up next to it in these little cabins. And then there are these villages that are kind of like a little ways like out past where the witches live. And then these villages are also separate from like actual civilization. So if you leave these little cabins in these glades and villages and go out beyond that, the world actually looks mostly like our world does now. It's just like a little bit more future. Like there's all kinds of like different, like slightly different technology. There's a much better like public transit system everywhere, like including America. And there's a lot more interconnectivity. So the technology is like slightly ahead of ours. But the thing is, this is sort of in stark contrast to these realms that have been reclaimed. And so the witches have to live separately from the villages because like the witches are very close to the entities and forces that are in the reclaimed lands. And so the witches are essentially imbued with like wild magic, right? And so if the witches enter the villages will then start experiencing like warps in reality and things like that. And they don't want to, so like magic is kind of considered like a disease. It's a disease or a contagion for like the entire world, and people are trying to contain it. They're trying to keep it from spreading. And then so the villages that are close to witches, they also are in these like contained environments because like the government has like these outposts where they won't let, like if you're like one of these witch villages, they won't let you into like regular society because then like the people in the villages also like have certain levels of this contagion, and if we allow them past a certain point, then like it's going to keep spreading and the rest of the world is going to be reclaimed and it'll be like the end of humanity or whatever. So within the cabin areas, there is like zero technology because of the force of the magic. Like you can't have electricity. You like just can't have technology. It just, everything completely like erodes and it won't work. Technology will just collapse. In the villages that are next to kind of like the witch glades, you can have some technology, but it's like unstable. So like they have electricity and you know they have like computers and things like that, but like you can only use them, it's like alerts will go out, so it'll be like, oh, we're having like, we can't access the internet right now because of like essentially the magical weather, right? And certain motions of like beings and entities that are like going on close by. And so the villages and the people who live in them have a relatively antagonistic relationship with the witches, but also they need the witches there to prevent the other beings that they don't want to deal with from getting into the villages. And it's the same sort of relationship between the villages and the rest of humanity. So in this story, I'm not really dealing with the outside world. I'm dealing predominantly with Nora, who is a young witch, and the village that she sort of unwillingly protects because like they don't, like witches don't necessarily choose to be witches. And at the start of this story, the inciting incident is that Nora's mom has died. And like Nora has not completed her witch education, so she's really unequipped to deal with all of the beings and entities and like rituals that she needs to do in order to keep things in her area okay. So that's what the story is about, like Nora sorting all of this out and her either becoming a witch or not becoming a witch, and potentially like people dying in strange ways, who knows. So I'm going to read that first chapter, and I'll do my best so you can see the text to have it up on the screen. And since this is a first draft, right, like we're reacting to a first draft, which should be very interesting, you're gonna see, if you're looking at the screen, there are certain certain titles will be in all capital letters. So I'm looking at one now and it says like village name in all capital letters. And that's because when I'm writing first drafts, instead of agonizing over like proper titles and proper names for like certain objects or cities or locations, I'll just write like in all caps thing name, so I know that when I'm coming back in subsequent drafts, I need to come up with like a cool and organic sounding name that sounds like it would be a real thing, right? And so I'm probably just gonna say the village, or I have another one that says like tree name here. So I'm gonna read it as the village or the tree. But there would be like, whenever you see like something all caps on the screen like that, just know that I would be coming back to give that, you know, a fantasy name or a made up name. So we'll go through the first chapter and I'll see how I feel about it. I do know that, so trigger warning for this, there is some gore, because I'm fairly certain that I do describe at least some of like decomposition or her experiencing her mom's dead body. So it's probably mid-level, but if you don't want to hear descriptions of like corpses, then you know, you can skip ahead or you can just skip the video. And so let us commence with chapter 1. Nora's mom was dead. Nora didn't understand that for several minutes. Her mom often sat in her big red chair for longer periods, staring straight ahead. Entering the fugue made their money, got them food and other favors from the people in the village. And most importantly, it kept those same people, those neighbors, from burning Nora and her mom alive, hanging them from the old tree where they used to hang people like Nora and Nora's mom. That was before anyone in the world knew what was going on in the village, before everyone knew that certain people had to exist whether anyone liked it or not, before they knew certain things had to happen at certain times, that certain gestures had to be made, because if they didn't and if they weren't, what happened in the village would happen everywhere, and no one wanted that. So I think that's fairly okay. There's like I'm making a stab at a certain kind of like whimsical style, I guess, like a little bit of it. The thing about her mom sitting in the chair, her mom often sat in her big red chair for longer periods, staring straight ahead. Like that's like a little bit confusing. I think anyway, so I would probably change it, but it's fine. Like I think that when you start, like even when I start doing that kind of whimsical style, what I'm thinking is like, how many people am I like pissing off right now? But I don't mind it. Accustomed to her mom's enduring silences, stillness, and mental vacancy, Nora ignored her mom's glassy stare and her stiff limbs until the sun set and she lit the lamps and candles. The longest fugue never went past dinner, when her mom never rose even after Nora set the table with their chipped dishware and wooden utensils and ladled the stew she made into their bowls. She crept nearer the old spirit throne, wondering how dangerous it would be to break an ongoing fugue. I'm still kind of okay with it, but like some of these longer sentences, like there's a lot of ands, so I would probably go back and like break that up. Close up, her mom's mottled skin became apparent. A swollen purple tongue poked from her chapped lips. A milky film glazed her dark eyes. A sour odor already rose from her flesh. Nora froze in her bow, her face too near her mom's face. That sounds weird to me. Nora froze in her, like she's bending, like I get that, but that kind of sounds like odd to me. Nora froze in her bow, her face too near her mom's face. Her throat closed, and it hurt like it did last winter when she caught the flu and stayed in bed for 2 whole weeks. Mom at her side with her medicines and broths and herb-saturated compresses. Her chest ached. When her jaws ground over each other, her teeth squeaked. Tears didn't come. Thoughts paused. Her blank mind stalled. We could probably get rid of, like, thoughts paused, her blank mind stalled, and get rid of one of those. Her mom was dead. She knew that. She knew her mom was dead, but that didn't make sense. Instead of sadness, a sick sense of guilt nauseated her. What if someone found out? What was she supposed to do? A sharp knock rattled the wooden door. Nora flinched. Swallowing, she held her breath. If she didn't move, didn't make a sound, maybe whoever it was would go away. Cricket song filled the otherwise quiet evening. The soothing sounds of nature wrapped the cottage in its gentle mantle. Nora's taut posture just began to relax when a second sound haunted the cursed twilight. Queer music leaked through the cottage's wooden walls. The sharp breath Nora hissed in stabbed her lungs. Rising goose flesh stood up the fine hairs dusting her arms and nape. The patter of several sets of footsteps circled her home. The tapping started at the windows. She shut her eyes tight. Even though she'd seen the people since she was small, she hated the way looking at them made her feel, like they knew every part of her, touched her somehow deep inside. Her pounding heart banged against her ribs. The knocker knocked again, their drumbeat rap slow, methodical. No matter how hard she pretended not to hear, not to be, what stood on the other side of the door would not vanish. They would not be fooled, and they wouldn't suffer fools either. Whoever knocked came specifically for her for a very specific reason, and they weren't from the village. They were from elsewhere. Whenever I write something like that, I always wonder, like, if I'm being too, it's not direct, but it's kind of overwrought with, like, taking in breaths, or like I'm describing, like, her getting goosebumps. I'm always kind of, like, conscious of, like, how much, like, should that even be in? I'm not sure. With leaden feet, Nora trudged to the bedroom she and her mom shared. She yanked the sheet from her mom's mattress and draped it over her mom's seated body. There's too many moms just in that sentence. Then she zombie walked to the front door. The iron latch vibrated beneath her hand. The unearthly melody invading her home intensified. After a trembling breath, she shoved down the latch and yanked open the door. The music stopped. The uncanny light of the liminal time between day and night filled the front room. A tall man's body filled the threshold. His presence seized her. I think I already put, like, Twilight somewhere else, but the uncanny light of the liminal time between day and night filled the room. You can kind of just, like, the uncanny light of evening, like, you can just shorten that. That's a little bit too, like, technical. It's a little too wordy. We can just say the uncanny twilight filled the front room, something like that. Uncanny purple light filled the room, something. A tall man's body, so I'm gonna pick up from there. Uncanny twilight filled the room. A tall man's body filled the threshold. His presence seized her. Nora couldn't move. She couldn't speak. What stood before her, barred from coming nearer by the iron-banded doorframe, seemed to halt the very rotation of the earth. All she could do was listen and pray. The man's long arms and legs were at odds with his stunted torso. His clothes were black and regal. The top of his narrow head, perched on a long and slender neck, went higher than the top of the doorframe. That's confusing, but I kind of get what I meant. The pale antlers growing from black hair, thinner than cobwebs, stretched higher than that. Large black eyes gazed down at her. While he had no mouth, or nose for that matter, he spoke. His description is a little bit confusing right now, but I mean, that can be cleaned up fairly easily. While he had no mouth or nose for that matter, he spoke. The death heralds a birth. 8 days there are to complete the cycle. Should the cycle cease, you will see me again, as will the rest of your village. When the antlered man stepped away from her door, Nora came unstuck. She blurted her question before she thought better of it. But how do I do any of that? Both hands clapped over her mouth. The people of the earth were never to be questioned. Questions carried consequences, sometimes kept secret for a decade or more, but they always fell on the heads of those ignorant or foolish enough to ask. The antlered man stood in the grassy space separating the cottage and blackthorn wood. Spectral lights danced between the dark trees. Strange forms cavorted beneath their entrancing light. Small things with chubby toddler bodies scampered from the sides of her house and into the forest. They came and went from elsewhere, where no human who'd ever been seen again had trod. The antlered man pointed a skeletal finger at the cottage. A book exists. The antlered man, I think we need another word for the antlered, like there's too many antlered mans. The antlered man returned to his woods and took his music, retinue, and the rest of the light with him. A breeze that carried the first fall chill rustled Nora's hair and her thrifted dress. Shivering, she slammed the iron-laced door and sealed herself inside with her mom's corpse. Tears came. Nora knelt at the foot of her mom's shroud. She gripped the stiff hand clutching the arm of the spirit throne. Screaming sobs tore her throat raw. This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen until she was older, after her mom taught her all the lessons. She understood some of their role in the village, but not enough to be the one thing standing between her neighbors and the people of the earth. The bargain Nora now dealt with was ancient, unbreakable, and she'd been bound to it from birth. With the candles and lamps still burning and dinner still on the table, she shut herself in the bedroom and climbed onto her mom's bed. The mattress's straw stuffing poked her. The thick comforter she pulled up cocooned her. She rocked on the bed, weeping until her eyes dried and itched, and dawn's blue light filtered in through the window. Nora felt heavy as the boulders they used. I see what I'm saying, but oh my God, I irritate myself. Nora felt heavy as the boulders they used to use to drown girls like her when they turned up. So, what? I need a drink. Probably I would keep that, but we know what I'm going for, right? But that is bad. She read about the Inquisitions and executions from some printouts a client brought her mom years ago. Internet didn't work this close to the wood. Power didn't either. Back then, she'd asked her mom if she was a witch, at which she laughed and had shaken her head. Women as we will never be questioned, and they would never dare kill us. They'd murder themselves if they did, and all their generations. I don't know what the fuck I'm trying to do there. Kind of I do, but at the same time, that's just, no. Nora didn't want to leave the bed. The mattress and blanket smelled like her mom, cardamom and orange peels. There was a book, however, a book she needed and needed quickly because she never wanted to see the antlered man again. Nora didn't bother with her washing, brushing her hair and teeth, or even changing out of her old dress and underwear. She rolled from the bed and headed to the workroom. When she entered the living area, a fog of stench hit her in the face. She drew up short and held an arm over her nose. Black flies crawled over the white sheet tenting her mom's body. They buzzed around her shrouded head. The fuzzy fat things also alighted on the crusted stew. I put the fuzzy fat things also alighted on the crusted over stew. Okay, that does make sense. The fuzzy fat things also alighted on the crusted over stew. A dark stain soiled the lower portion of the sheet. Reeking sludge smeared the floor beneath her mom's feet. Holding her breath, Nora ignored the growing nightmare in the cottage and barged into the workroom, kicking the door shut behind her. Bundles of dried herbs and flowers hung from the ceiling. Shelving occupied all of the free wall space besides the one section of the room blocked off by the big wooden work table. Bottles and jars packed with stones and dirt and bones and blended concoctions and various other strange specimens crammed the shelves along with leather-bound volumes and canvas notebooks and crudely compiled collections of notes and printouts and clipped articles. That is extensive, but I actually kind of like it. But the thing is, it's sort of like that big, like, and sentence is, like, mimicking the way the room has an organized clutter to it, so it's fine. But, like, the other sentences that are kind of like that elsewhere in the chapter and in the text itself, like, need to be broken up so that that's kind of apparent. Like, when we get here, it's more, like, obvious that I'm creating an illustration. A large dark cabinet loomed in the corner next to the work table Nora knew was locked. I know what I'm saying, but it's a large dark cabinet loomed in the corner next to the work table Nora knew was locked. Because, like, it's kind of unclear whether she's referring to the work table being locked or the cabinet to me. Like, I know it's the cabinet, but I don't know, that's kind of unclear. She didn't know what her mom kept in there. The key always hung around her neck. The key, like, I don't know if that's unclear, her pronoun. The key always hung around, I could say the elder witch, like, well, they're not witches, the elder woman's neck or something, because, like, both Nora and her mom are she. There were 3 standing shelves stuffed to bursting with more manuscripts that even piled in towers around the shelves. I don't like that sentence either. She clawed her fingers into her tangled hair. Which book was the right book? How was she supposed to tell? Nora talked down her rapidly rising panic. She approached the first shelf and tugged out the first tome. A bouquet of leather and old paper and pungent herbs perfumed the book. The brass clasps fastening the covers clicked apart. She rifled through pages dense with crabbed writing, detailed illustration, and diagrams. A pitiful noise gusted from her as she searched the recorded information. The writing baffled her. None of it made sense, and a large portion of it was just symbols, and she couldn't tell what the subject was based on the drawn portions either. She tossed down the book, which struck the stone floor with a loud thunk. Another volume slid from the collection, then another and another. The pages flipped in a frenzy. Discarded books piled at her feet. Letting loose a frustrated screech, Nora collapsed onto her knees, the cold stone rough beneath her shins. The heels of her hands ground into her aching eyes. Sobs shook her. Hitching breaths echoed in the space where her mom used to bustle and sing and have every answer and take care of every problem. It's like, what isn't fine about this is, like, the amount of emoting descriptions, like, really just, like, hitching breaths echoed in that sentence that starts with hitching breaths. That's fine to stay. And then maybe her collapsing, and then probably we can get rid of the heels of her hands sentence and the sob shook her and just, like, tighten that up. Hitching breaths echoed in the space where her mom used to bustle and sing and have every answer and take care of every problem. Nora couldn't do this. In 8 days, the antlered man would come for her, and when he did, she and the village would be doomed. I don't know, she and the village met their doom? I don't know, something about them being doomed, whatever. It pains me to see you in such a state. What might I do to dry these tears? Oh, I don't know if I'd like, I'll do the voice. It pains me to see you in such a state. What might I do to dry these tears? A nasally voice said from behind her. Gasping, Nora angled around, and when she did, her heart stuttered. And sped, we can get rid of and sped. Her heart stuttered. A small man stood on the work table. A wide beam of yellow sunlight, alive with dust, spotlit him. a spotlight of yellow sun, probably a spotlight of yellow sun alive with, anyway, we'd have to like rework that. It might just be the sunlight, a wide sunbeam alive with dust spotlit him. I think it's the repetition of spotlight, of sunlight and spotlit, like, is just not working for me, like, at all. I'm gonna start the paragraph over again though. A small man stood on the work table. A wide beam of yellow sunlight alive with dust spotlit him. His bald head gleamed and his green eyes narrowed with his unsettling smile. The blue suit he wore hugged his round body. Bare feet poked from the bottom of his trousers. He had no toes. Each foot came to a dull point as though he wore flesh-colored slippers. Nora knew this man, but this was the first time she had evidence he was real. The small man appeared to her in the middle of the night. Twice or 3 times a year since she was 3, she'd startle awake in her bed and see him standing at the end of her mattress, illuminated by the silvery moonlight pouring through the window. He was lighter than air and never said anything to her. All he'd do was stand at the end of her bed and smile. No matter how hard she tried to stay awake, she always nodded off, and when she next woke, he'd always be gone. She'd never whispered a word of him to her mom. Though she never knew why, it felt wrong to speak of him, even if she should have mentioned that some sort of being managed to enter the cottage despite the iron and herbs and the various unseen protections her mom maintained around their property. She didn't know if he was one of the people of the earth, but to be safe, she didn't answer his question directly. When it came to those from elsewhere, bargains were easy to enter and near impossible to escape. I can't find a book about the cycle, and I need to complete it before my time runs out. The small man's smile broadened. I know of your book. I can point it out. Nothing from elsewhere, not even answers, came for free. What's the price? Nora asked. I'm not doing the voice. Oh well, I'm not doing it. A favor to be claimed later. A chill scuttled down Nora's spine. She shuddered. She doesn't have to shudder. A chill scuttled down Nora's spine. We will get rid of the she shuddered later. The man on the table seemed nice. He seemed small and helpful and not at all up to no good. But nothing from elsewhere was ever as it seemed. The offer is a generous one, but I must decline, Nora said with a hand over her heart. She rose and, never turning from the man, backed from the room. Except for his eyes and his mouth, the small man didn't move. He appeared two-dimensional, like someone painted him on the air. When her back bumped the door, she blinked, and when her eyes opened, he was gone. A flurry of swirling dust, all he left behind. I feel mid about it. That is the end of chapter 1. So far there are 12,133 words written of that, which double spaced, that's coming to like 44 pages. We just read 9 of them. I'm probably at more like 8.5 because I start my chapter, like this is in standard manuscript format or very close to it. And so chapter 1 is starting at like the middle of the first page. I don't feel like, I don't feel excited by this story, but I don't hate it either. There's like some confusing stuff that like I'm trying to do that I don't think is coming across. And also, I know the reason why I kind of hate, like I'll start writing stories that are like this and then I just abandon them because what I really want, which isn't like, I'm fine with the fairy tale-esque quality of this, like the folklore quality, I'm good with all of that. But like what I really like want to do, and probably it's because I'm trying too hard to do it, I'm trying to be too descriptive instead of oblique, is I am trying too hard to convey the weirdness of these beings and how it feels for them to be around you, because I at some point would love to write a story that allows people to experience what it is like to have like the alien abduction experience or the spirited away experience, because it feels a specific way. And so I know when I'm writing something like this, I'm trying to impart that feeling and failing. So while I don't think that this is especially bad, I don't know that it's especially compelling either. I knew when I was writing this that this was going to be like way more atmospheric and much more of a slow burn. And it's fine. I don't know. It's fine. And it also, like, it's making me think, like, reading this first chapter is making me think of the other Nora that I just finished writing about. And at times, she is the only character that is taking action within a scene. And that's actually, to me anyway, a lot harder to write and to keep interesting. At least to me, like when I do it, I'm thinking about Lovecraft, and like he pretty much, a lot of his stories are just like one character at times experiencing something, and some, like, they do get involved with like other people, or they'll have conversations, but a lot of them is just them kind of walking through a very, very strange experience and then like going mad at the end. So he's doing that. In my opinion, he does it successfully in most of his stories. But I'm always sort of concerned with like, oh, is that actually like super freaking boring that she's just by herself and reacting to these things? And like we get into, I'm pretty sure, let me look at chapter 2. Yeah, in chapter 2, we do meet other characters because like the primary antagonist of this novel is another group of teens that live in the village, and like their interactions together, because there's drama, you know, there's always drama. But mostly there are like instances, like whenever I always get so worried about this, is that like, I know that there are similarities between like these two novels in that the main character, things are literally happening to her. Like there's nothing, like there is like, obviously there's metaphor being used in like the novel that I completed, but the surreal things that are happening to the main character are also literal. Like it's literally happening. It's not like, oh, it was all a dream. Like, no, it's literally happening. And so I always get concerned that when I'm describing something surreal, or I'm trying to, like, I'm just losing everybody. Like, it just, like, I feel like when I write it, it's like, it's not making sense, or it seems random. And even though I know what's going on, and that these events like have a purpose and they are coming out of like a specific momentum of history, and that they are leading to like a specific conclusion, I get concerned that like to another person, it's just coming off as like, she just did some weird stuff and it just doesn't seem like it makes a damn bit of sense. And like, I just know, like, when I think about that, I'm comparing myself to other like much better writers of weird fiction contemporarily and throughout history. So I'm thinking of like Jeff Vandermeer and H.P. Lovecraft and oh god, I'm gonna forget her name. She wrote Don't Look Now, and Rebecca. I'm comparing myself to people like that, and also to Donna Tartt, because at least in The Secret History, I never read The Goldfinch, but in The Secret History, there's like weird, surreal crap happening in that book that's like happening like off page, and they're describing it later, and it's like, wait, what happened? The gods descended? There was like a bacchanal, like hedonistic murder? Okay. And also y'all went to another dimension? Oh, all right. Well, that's fine. That's all. Like that like spoilers for like The Secret History if you like you didn't know. So I compare myself to that, and also to people like Arthur Machen, like especially in the white people, because there are like passages in stories like that that's just like, oh, he's getting like the way this feels like when you encounter something freaking weird like this, like in real life. That is kind of how it looks. These are like the sorts of events that tend to surround it, and that is what, like, when I read about it, it's like inducing that same like uncanny feeling in me. And Thomas Ligotti is also really good at that within like certain stories that he writes. And so when I'm comparing myself to people who are much better than me, essentially, I'm going, ha, that's cute. Like, that's really amusing and quaint. But it's sort of like, I just need to sort of let the story be what it is, which is essentially a weird and like fairy tale-esque little folklore story that is a slow burn into just doom. Like, in this story, almost nothing good happens. And I would say, like, the ending, you can kind of look at it as something positive for Nora, but it's positive in the same way that the end of, like, The Witch is positive, right? It's a story like that, except a bit more uncanny. So anyway, that's the first chapter of this novel that I have no idea if I will ever finish. This wasn't supremely, like, hilarious for me to react to. I would have to find something that I wrote like 10 or more years ago, and then we can be like, oh, it's bad. And I know it exists, like, I can find it, but I'm just like, I don't want to. But like, that's like the fun of like cringing and roasting, because I don't like, there's nothing like too roastable in this for me. Like, it's fine, and the mistakes are just like basic cleanups. Ooh, a latticed stinkhorn. I like it when I get into like the scent of soil and leaf rot, and sometimes the nauseated musk of a latticed stinkhorn permeated the air. Bitch, I don't think I go like purple in my prose, but I do need to cut some of this description. I liked that latticed stinkhorn reference though. I hate those things like so freaking much. I wanted to write this because like I had a penchant for describing the woods and putting like weird, this is exactly that meme. This story is actually exactly that meme, which like, it's a horror story set in the woods. There's a deer. The deer's fucked up. Like, it's that meme, because that all of that is in this story. This is like my fucked up deer folklore horror story, and it's a relatively small part of the story that has the fucked up deer. But there's certain things, so like the beings of the earth are like, of course, these are fairies, who like don't like using that word, but that's what they are, and they do things to people and creatures that is upsetting. And I really, when there was like a dream I had like about that, assuming it's a dream, I don't know, but like I saw like there was like a certain party that I was at in this dream where it was like a people of the earth or beings of the earth like art party, and there were all of these like sculptures, right? But they were like living sculptures, and it was like so like The Cell. And so I was just like, I woke up from that and I was like, I am going to eventually put some of those images into a coherent story. And I knew it was gonna have to be about the beings of the earth, obviously, because to me, they're the ones that do weird, I'm saying it's sick shit, but it's like sick to people, but for them, it's just like there's not like human morality is like not a thing. And this is my fucked up deer story, and so I really want to read like I know his first name is Adam, but it's the guy who wrote The Ritual. I think he also writes a lot of folk horror or folkloric horror, and I would like to read how he does that to see if I can maybe take some inspiration and lessons from it. I think it's fine. I think it's probably worth pursuing at a certain point, but I have like my writing schedule, kind of, I know what it is and I know what projects that I want to get out, and this one is like completely on the back burner. So for those of you who listened, I hope maybe you enjoyed at least hearing some about my writing process and hearing at least kind of what a first draft sounds like for me, what like rough writing sounds like. This one's probably like this one, since I wrote it like a lot quicker. This one that I just finished, I think I got this out maybe like, I'll be generous and say like it took over a month. That's not usually like my drafting time. I tend to take like a super long time to get writing done. So I'm happy that I got this one out so quick, but usually what that means and why it takes me longer to get drafts out is because I can't stand when my writing is like super clumsy and super messy, like all over. And I knew writing this, I was just in my mind going, just get over it, just get over it, just write, just like finish it, and you're gonna edit it, and who gives a shit? Like nobody's gonna see this. This is not the draft that you're gonna query, so it doesn't matter. Just get the draft all the way out so you can finish it and move on to stage 2. Or what I'm gonna do is probably get out maybe another first draft, or at least half of one, before I start typing this up. And it's gonna be something that's more like a dark fantasy. I'm thinking I'm gonna cannibalize a lot of Fearsome, which I have like a couple of chapters of that like just stuck up on some playlist, and it's not like you can listen to that as well. It's not that good. But I can cannibalize pretty much most of that story and like turn it into something a little bit different than what it currently is. And I think I could end up querying that as well, making it more of like, instead of a portal fantasy, I would just turn it into just like, it's just a fantasy world that everybody's in, instead of like a realm that people from Earth are going to. Like I would make it like kind of not hell. Like right now it's about someone going to hell, and I would like change that up somewhat. Even though I think I would still probably call like the beings who live there like hellions or like demons or whatever. Hopefully some of you enjoyed that, found it amusing, or I don't know, maybe a little bit interesting, but I don't know what to do for these little sign-offs since they're not officially reads, and I don't want to like do the read ending on just a little random writing chit chat. So my traumatized babies and mentally ill Barbies, I hope you are out there creating whatever you are wanting to create, even if it is just a good time for yourself.